Simply type your question into the dialog box at the bottom of the screen and send. We will attempt to address your questions during the presentation. After the formal presentation has ended, we will review and answer all remaining questions. Today's presenter is Brian Laird, Senior Web Technician. Brian, take it away.
All right, thank you, Erica. So today we will be talking about setting up a new site in OU Campus. And so I'd like to just start by going over our agenda. And there are really kind of three basic parts of what you do when you want to set up a site. The first thing is you want to gather that required information that you're going to need to know, so that way when you're filling out the forms and the different pieces that you need to do, that you have everything in place, not scrambling to try to find it after you've started and trying to pick it up. It's always a good idea to grab that first. The next thing that we actually will do is set up the site, use the site setup or site clone feature, and that'll allow you to set up the site in OU Campus. And then finally, we'll want to verify the setup. Make sure that everything actually did get set up as you wanted it to. So let's go ahead and look at the required information that you would need. One thing that you would want to know is naming conventions for any of the pieces that you want to have. In particular, the site name is an important one to keep in mind. And the reason is that it's not something that you can easily update. It can't be updated through the interface in OU Campus and requires some back-end work as a request. So it's good to kind of keep a good convention of whatever you're using for your sites to keep them consistent so that when you create it, it is easy to find and understand what you're looking for. A common site name would be if you just have a first site, and if it's publishing to a www location, it could be called www. There might be something for a different school in the site, and it might be the name of that, like business or whatever that happens to be. But whatever you pick, just make sure that it's consistent and stick with your naming conventions, and that'll help things a lot later on. Another very important thing when you're getting the required information for the site are the production server credentials. This allows you to actually publish to a site in OU Campus, and this is where all the files that you'll see get pushed to and the live site actually exists. So you do need to have credentials to be able to connect to that via FTP or SFTP. And then once you have all the information, then you'll be able to input it in correctly and make sure that that connection is all set up, and we'll look into that a little bit later today. Another thing to keep in mind, if there are any account level limitations that you have set in OU Campus, there are certain functions and functionality that can be enabled and disabled at the account level, and those will determine in part what you can and cannot do at the site level when you're creating a new site. So talking a little bit about the actual site setup, you can also use a site clone if you want to take information from an existing site. There are some required fields like the site name, the production server credentials that are either FTP or SFTP. You'll need the server, you'll need the FTP type, username or password. It could be a public key as opposed to just a password if you use that capability. And the FTP route and the HTTP route. We'll go over each and every one of these in detail in OU Campus a little bit more, but these are required fields that you need to have when you are setting up a new site in OU Campus. There are other options that are also worth mentioning that are useful to keep in mind. One is the template location and the directory, and this is where those templates will exist in OU Campus. So these are your new page wizards. Usually you're used to seeing those with the .tcf and .tmpl extensions. But these do have to exist in a particular location, and this field will allow you to specify where those exist. The recycle bin path is also an important one if you want to be able to put a particular location when you delete a file where you want those to actually exist. There's another option called remove OU tags, and all it does is when you publish a page, if there are any OU tags in your source code, those get automatically removed so they aren't in the source code of your published files on your live site. Most of the time, you'll probably want to leave that one checked, but it's not required to do that one way or another, but usually good to go over. Use HTML schema will allow you to choose what kind of HTML that you are, the WYSIWYG editor or just edit editor is looking for to actually change the content when it's editing it. So if it's HTML5, which is the most common at the moment, you just want to make sure that is selected so that way everything that the WYSIWYG does when it corrects incorrect content or decides to change things will follow that. And another one is just the URL type, if you want it to be absolute or relative or so on. And there's another one to allow uppercase folder names. By default, this is not checked, and so when you start your site and you leave this unchecked, if you have any folders that you wanted to upload or you want to create that have uppercase characters inside of them, it would not work unless you have that allowed in the site settings. So if that's something that you see in the files that you want to put in there, just an important thing to keep in mind, but it's definitely not required. You can leave that unchecked. And then once you actually have your site set up, the next thing that you'll want to do is actually verify the setup, make sure that it actually works and everything connects and so on. So some of the things that you want to check is, can you do these things, the following things that we're going to talk about here without getting any errors in OU Campus? One simple thing is just to view the production tab and see if it actually connects and can view the files. Publish a page and view that published page, making sure that again, those FTP credentials are working. In the same way, you want to be able to rename pages and delete pages. And these are all related to those production server credentials that when we were gathering that required information, just to make sure that it all works correctly there. So with all that, let's actually take a look in OU Campus and see how this looks. Yes?
Before we do, we have a quick question from Joel Arias, who asks, if you allow uppercase folder names, does that make all the URLs case sensitive?
No, I don't believe it does. It just allows you to upload a file into OU Campus that has a folder with that name. So if you create a folder in OU Campus, all it is doing is checking to see whether or not you can upload it with a uppercase letter, but it doesn't actually change any of those settings that you might have on the server side, such as is it case sensitive or so on.
All right, great.
All right. So let us now go into OU Campus, and we will take a look at how this all looks with the site setup. So I am logged into OU Campus here with a few different sites. I happen to have one called blayered here, which we're just going to take a look at and use to create a new site. But if you were just to start a site from scratch, what we would do is we just hit New, and you can fill out all this information here. As you can see, I have disabled a couple of these options at the account level where it's telling me this particular one, I have final check disabled as an example, and I also have a couple of these disabled at the account level. So with those different pieces that you have there, again, bear in mind that there are certain limitations that you will have on your site that you will not be able to do if it's disabled at the account level. If you have the access to the account level, which you should to be a level 10 to go here and it makes sense with your organization, you can go to Set Up Account, and you can change these different features that you have available there. As you can see, I had page check disabled before. If I change that, say Set by Administrator, and these options are now available. And let's just turn on these other Dependency Manager and Binary Management that I was showing you. If I change those options and make them available at the account level, and then I go back into Site and I hit New Site, then when we go down, you will see, oops, I didn't get that one. It should then refresh. Sometimes that actually fixes things. Oh, I might have missed one thing here. Let me go to that one. Yeah, so these two I changed. I just didn't change the right setting for the top one. Sorry about that. But the Dependency Manager, you can see those different settings are available here. Let me see, which one did I have? I had final check there before. Let me go ahead and go back to the account level and see what I've got it set by administrator. So let me just turn it on for now. And that should get me there. As always, there's always a couple different ways to get to different places. Now you can see I have final check available. What I had is I had it set by administrator a second ago, so you would have to go in at a deeper level to actually enable it and not just have it at the site's level when I did that initially. So let me go ahead now and go back to this new site, and let's just take a look at these options in a little more detail that we were going over. But the thing to keep in mind initially, though, is that before you even fill this out, just make sure that you have the settings are available that you think are available, such as if you wanted to have final check available and some of those options such as, binary management, dependency manager, and all that. There are definitely several different options that you can set at the account level. And so each and every one of those you do want to, keep in mind. If you don't see something, it might actually be because the account level is set to disable that. So you can, as you can see here, put in, if you want to create a new site, you'll want to put in a site name. And this is the site name that you'll see in your list of sites. In OU Campus, it doesn't get used really anywhere outside of OU Campus. So this really is just for your own use of when you're looking at the sites. When you see your site drop-down list here, you can see the different pieces and so on. Also, if you go to Setup Sites, these are the names of the sites. So the one I'm looking at right now is B. Laird, and this just happens to be a site that I'm looking at here. Now, you can, if you want to create a site, as I said, you can hit this green button here, and you can click New, and it will take you to this new site setup. And if you have a completely new site that you are starting fresh, this is how you'll want to go. In my case, I'm going to go another option here, and I'm going to actually go to the actions of an existing site, and I'm going to hit Clone. And the reason is because it already has some of this information here filled in for me. Now, one of the big noticeable differences between clone and just the new creating new site is that it does give you the option to include staging files. And what this will do is this will actually copy over all your files that you have in OU Campus from wherever you were copying and cloning that site from to this new site that's being created. So this checkbox can be very useful if you have a site that you really want to duplicate initially and bring a lot of that resources and so on over. I believe with the new 10.5 update, it also allows you to copy over many other things that will not just be files, but you can do things such as snippets and other pieces as well. And so that can be very useful, directory variables, templates and template groups, and RSS feeds. So that's, again, with the 10.5 update, you are able to do that. So that could be a useful thing. I'm actually not going to copy the staging files. The only reason I'm copying this over right now is just to reuse some of this server information to use as a demo here. But I'll go ahead and give this site a name. Again, you want to follow your naming convention of what you are going to be using. If a very common one that we will use, again, as I mentioned before, is www. If you already have a www, sometimes we'll do it like this, where it is the year that it was made in OU Campus to distinguish it from a previous one, if you have a redesign or similar. And so I'm just going to call it www-2017 for now. But again, this is really arbitrary, and the only really limitation is to make sure that it follows the naming conventions that you want to stick with. The server is the actual server where you're going to connect to for the production server. And so this piece here is going to point to wherever you want to publish out to. So this would be the, the URL or address of where you want to connect. And then you can choose what kind of connection that you want to make to this particular location. So you can connect via SFTP, FTP, or passive FTP. And then in this particular case, I've chosen SFTP with this particular connection. And you can also use a public key if you want to instead of a password. You do have the option to use either one of those. And if you do use the public key, it'll ask for the, you'll want to know what key that is with your server administrator so they can set that up on the production server side of things outside of OU Campus. And once you create this, and you'll see the public key will appear right around here where it says include staging files, you would actually see the public key in the site setup. And then you would just give in that username and password or public key or whatever your credentials happen to be. But again, all this is required. You can see they're in bold to let you know that. And then a couple important ones are the FTP route and the HTTP route. So the FTP route is just where on the server is this site located. So on the file system on the server that this is pointing to, in this case it's blair.oudemo.com, there is a file folder structure, and inside of that you have to say where are all these files located that are going to map to your particular HTTP location. So for this new one, since I already have a site in public HTML, I'm going to do something that you typically wouldn't want to do and create just a subfolder in here. Typically you'd want a separate folder. But I'm just going to call this TT for Training Tuesday. And then the HTTP route is the location that you'll go to in your browser over HTTP to access the particular location that maps to that FTP route. So Mike, if you understand the server stuff, hopefully it's not too confusing there, but normally, these are going to map, whatever you have here originally had this particular location will map to this location on the server. So I can access this via FTP is a simple way to think of it, and then I can map and visit the same files this way through HTTP when I'm visiting it in my browser. So those are the main FTP settings that you really want to have set up when you're setting up a site. And now, once you've actually got your username and your password in the server and all that, a very helpful little tool here is just this test connection button. So all you have to do is click it, and it's just going to run a test, and it's going to see whether or not it can actually connect to the server. If you have something wrong and, my username is incorrect, it'll give you a message, and it'll tell you that it did not work, which means that you need to check your credentials and potentially, any firewall settings or anything to make sure that this can communicate properly to the server. I'm going to change this back. Again, test my connection. If you see the green with the checkbox, that's always a good thing, and that'll allow you to know that you have your credentials will work, and OU Campus can communicate with the server. I should also point out, though, that even though you may get this connection, it doesn't necessarily test if you have all the privileges that you need with the server. It just means that it was able to communicate with the server successfully with the test. With this is why we'll be doing that verifying section when we're done. We want to make sure that we can write files to the server and not just view them, delete files, modify files. And if you can't do any of those things, that's something that you want to talk with the whoever is managing your server, and you'll want to make sure that OU Campus has those privileges so that way you can edit your files, publish your files, delete any files if need be, and so on. So this is kind of all those important FTP settings, kind of going all the way down to the HTTP route here. Moving on from that, there's a image directory here, and this is just by default where the images would be stored in OU Campus. And so this is, typically when we set it up, we'll put it in the all those resources in _ resources, but it's just a root relative path to where you would want that to go. And so that kind of gives you that piece there. I do see that there is a question over here, And it says, what is group writable group writable versus user. And so this is talking about this piece right here. And so these are different options for what are called the UMask settings. And so this is the options available for secure FTP. But they actually set the Unix-based file permissions. And so it doesn't actually affect your existing files, but just new files. But it allows you to actually change whether you can, the files are just user writable or also the user and the group. And if you're familiar with, file permissions and settings, you can have the user in the group and so on that are available. And this just allows, sets it to say who can actually set those, have those permissions. If you understand the, how they map to the different numbers, this would be set to 644 as far as the user rights are concerned. Hopefully that answers the question there. I'm happy to explain a little bit further if you do have questions. Another useful thing with all these settings as well is that you can go into the OU campus here, and anytime you see these nice question marks here, this will actually bring you into the support site, and it has a lot of good information on a lot of these pieces as well, and that should help. Most of the time, though, for this particular piece, you don't really need to change it. It's probably going to be fine leaving it here. And if you do have any questions about that when you set it up, definitely feel free to ask, any of our wonderful support people here at Omni Update, or you might, want to check with your server administrator for more information on that if there is something that is required there. And definitely this will be something that you do want to coordinate with, your server administrator to get this information and that connection all set up. So moving down a little bit here, the template location is one that I did point out a little bit earlier. And this is just where the templates will be located in OU, either in OU campus or on the production server that we've just defined. So in this particular instance, I have these templates set to local. And what that means is the templates actually exist in OU campus, and they are pulled from OU campus when you are trying to create new pages and new files using those new page wizards. So when you set this to remote, what that would do is then when you create a template, a TCF and TMPL file with the icon that goes with it, you would have to publish it to the production server for OU campus to see it, since it would be looking in the production server for those templates. If you leave them local, then everything happens locally in OU campus. It does not have to make a request to the production server to create those new pages. But when you do create a template, it'll immediately be available when you save it. And so when you use local, it is recommended that you would use template groups, so that way when you're working on a template, it doesn't just appear randomly to your users until you're ready to release it to them by assigning it to a template group. So this template directory is just where those are exist. Yes.
Sorry, we have a question. Angela French would like to know if there's a reason that you would want to host your template files on production.
Yeah, I mean, it really kind of goes down to your preference of how you want to do it. One reason that I have seen users use their template files on production is because they weren't using the template groups, and they just wanted all the templates available. And so as soon as they were working on or creating a new template, it would then be available whether or not they were ready to release it or not. So one of the big reasons is with that. But you may have another reason that you might want to use it on production. Typically, unless I have a reason to do otherwise, I will typically go with local, unless I have a particular reason that might be needed for a particular site that might need it to be on remote. All right, and then the last one in this particular section here, we're in the production server FTP settings, and all this whole box is just available to. And this is just saying which group actually has the rights to actually browse and publish the production server. So it's as simple as what it is. Typically, you'll just leave this as everyone, but you can, change it to different groups that you have set up, maybe limited just administrators or whatever particular people that you have. But this, if you do change this, it would definitely, reduce very much who can actually affect the changes to production. One reason you might want to use this is if you have a set of users that you want to have everything approved through, and they're the ones who you want to publish, and then everyone would make their edits in OU Campus. They wouldn't be able to publish because it might be limited here. And then when they send it to the approver could then publish, and they would be part of whatever group has access to publish. But that's just another setting that's available there. And in almost every case that I've worked with, it's usually just left available to everyone, and any adjusted settings then end up being set later on at a lower level on maybe a page or directory to restrict users in that way. But it is available and possible to do in the site settings here. The next section that we have here is for the direct edit button, and all this is that direct edit button that you have at the bottom of your page, which allows you to get into OU Campus. This just allows you to choose, first of all, is it even going to appear? Is it going to be a regular button, transparent? And then this code just says what that button will look like. In this particular case, you can see it's doing the copyright symbol. And it's got this link on it here, and the kind of important thing to notice on the link is that you see this *0 with the direct edit button, and that automatically puts in the that link. And there's, I believe, 4 different special variable values that you can put into this button code, starting with 0. And that'll allow you to do the href, which is obviously most important one here, but you can also do the output with like the last updated date and so on, depending on which one of these you want to use. If you do want more information on that, how it works, again, there is a nice link to the support site right here that can allow you to see exactly what those are, but they are all available and can be useful for that. In the site preferences, this is where you can actually put the path to where the recycle bin directory will be. So I happen to have mine as, .trash. You could do recycle bin as shown in the example there. It's really up to you, but it's definitely something you'll want to do a location that you aren't expecting users to create pages at, as this is where the recycled pages will go. So that way you can restore them later if you do decide to, or you can delete them from there, just like a regular recycle bin on your computer. You can also set the time zone and locales as well, and who can actually access assets on the group. So, wherever you're located, you can feel free entering that information, and then that will be where the system uses for those different pieces. And again, these you don't necessarily have to set, since it is something that is set in the account setting first. But again, you can override this for the site. And then, like a lot of things in OU Campus, you can also override it at a lower level, in this case by individual users. The publish settings here are where you can actually set the final check options. If you want to force a final check to run when you publish a page, which is usually a good idea, and you can say which final check options you want to actually have available. And you can actually set the publish button to only be enabled if final check passes. And that's what this is here. So if you check only when conditions are met, let's say you only want it to be able to publish if it's W3C valid, then you have to make sure that that check is run here, and then you would check it here, and then only if that particular validation passes would that publish button be available so that you could publish your pages. So it's a way that you can, if you would like to, you know, enforce that some of those different pieces are passed before you actually publish a page. Or you can just leave it at always and have more of a user discretion, or if you have some pages that you know aren't going to meet some of these that you want to have available, you may want to just manually run those checks and enforce that with approvers and workflow and so on. But that option is available for you there. And then you can also, if you have this set up for Facebook and Twitter setup, you can say what's the default message that would be posted when you publish it. But this is the piece that I really wanted to point out earlier. In almost every case, you're probably going to want to have this box checked so that you don't see the OmniUpdate tags in publish time. And by tags, it's not the tag management tags, but like the OUC div tags, editable region tags, properties, and so on. Anything you see like that, it'll remove it on publish, but they'll still be there when you're working in OU Campus. But those particular, that particular checkbox, I do recommend that you have it checked unless you have a particular reason that you actually need to see the OmniUpdate specific tags on your published pages. So the next piece is actually looking at the WYSIWYG editor and the settings for that. I did point this out a minute ago. And, this helper text actually is pretty useful in letting you know exactly how this works. But basically, it's whether or not you want to use the HTML5 schema. And if you have a newer page and design, you're almost certainly going to want to have this checked. But if you have some kind of an older design that isn't using that, the WYSIWYG might try to fix it for you based off of the schema that it's using, and it might change things that you don't want it to. So it should match whatever you are using, but most likely it's going to be the HTML5. Then the URL type. Typically in OU Campus we'll set this all to be root relative, but you can have absolute links so that they're fully qualified, or page relative links if needed as well. But this is when you have those dependency tags and other generated links in OU Campus, this setting will determine how those links are written out. And then if you want to have decorative images available that don't use the alt text, if you want to have that possibility for certain things, you can actually enable that for either administrators or everybody. But typically you want to keep things accessible with most of your images and so on. So usually we'd leave that disabled, but it's available. There's also the ability to disable the image resizing feature and the image alignment menu when you're putting your images into OU Campus. And then finally, you can actually set the toolbar if you have different toolbars set in OU Campus. You can set this at the site level as well as setting it at lower levels as well. But it would determine if you have a custom toolbar set, you could have it so it limits which options are available when people are editing in the WYSIWYG editor. The next two sections are almost identical. It's the file naming and the binary file naming. And really the only difference is whether it's just regular, text-based files, or if they're binary files like your images and PDFs and so on. But you can set a default extension form if you'd like. But this is kind of the most notable thing in here, is a file name regex. And what this will do is this will allow you to limit what the users can put when they're creating new files. In this case, it's only uppercase level letters, lowercase letters, numbers, and then it looks like the dot, underscore, and hyphen are there. So this will, you can put in, if you understand, the regular expressions, you can put in any, regular expression you want there to limit file names. But one thing that I do want to note with this is that you do have to also have understand there are restrictions in the OU Campus file system itself, and there are special characters that even if you have them allowed in the regex, the system will not allow you to do it. Notable would be one would be like a space. If you try to do a file with a space in OU Campus, it will not allow you to upload it because of the system settings. But you know, within those restricted characters from the system, you do have the ability to restrict it further.
Before you go on, we have a question.
Sure.
We have a question. How can you make all template paths coming from shared resources? Is the question.
So how can you make all template paths come from shared resources? And that's a good question. So this kind of goes back up to when I was talking about the template directory here. And so this is saying where OU Campus looks for those templates. And there's another level here that's not in the site settings, but there is a hidden folder in OU Campus called omni-inf. And what you can do is actually place, and it exists only in staging in OU Campus, on the OU Campus staging server, but you can actually place templates in that directory. And what that'll do is you can, let's say if you set that at the account level, there's a folder there. You can put all of your templates in there, and any site within that account that you've placed those templates in that kind of hidden folder there, will share those resources. And then what happens in that particular location, this is still something you can define and put here, and any templates that you put in this location will be available, and if they happen to have the same name as the shared templates, they would actually take precedence. Just think of it like the other things in OU Campus, kind of the closer you are to the content, the lower level you are, the more precedence it tends to have. But how you would actually share those templates across different sites would be using that hidden omni-inf folder. And that can, again, be set at the account level. It can actually be set at the skin level as well if you happen to be going to that level there. If you don't understand what that means and you aren't using that setup, you can probably ignore what I'm talking about here. But it is possible to share templates. But this particular setting here is really just for the templates that are used for this particular site. And again, you can override those shared templates if you happen to have that set up. And then I see another question here relating to the final check. And the question is there a combination of settings to require final check by user rather than for the entire site? I want to require some users to run final check before all publishes, but not necessarily all users. And so this is, again, the site settings here like we're talking about. I'd have to check for individual users. I know there are some settings. I don't know if you can adjust that for final check or not. But we can definitely look at that and get back on that particular question. This particular one will, as you noticed, it will be for the entire site of forcing final check. But yeah, I'm not sure if there's a ability to actually do that for a user. I can do a quick little check at the user settings here. If I happen to pick one, if you have a lower level, you do have kind of user options here. And this is where I would expect that kind of a thing to be. But again, I don't think there was one for final check that I recall. But we can confirm that. Yeah, is there one?
For preferences, depending on the user level and how you have your site configured, but you can enable and disable page check for a user. So it would show up in this preferences panel, and that may be dependent on what you have your site settings for, but it is possible to have page check as, let's see, okay, it's if set by an, let's see, okay, if it's set to, so when you're setting page check up at the site level, if it's set to set by user at the account level, the user may configure this option from settings. If set by an administrator is set, then level 10 administrator may enable and disable page check on a user by user basis. If page check is not enabled at the account level, this is not available.
That's right. Yeah.
So basically,
and that's
you want
actually where I was earlier. Yeah.
So where you were in the
go back. Where I was in the beginning, where I actually made a mistake. This is the settings that is being put there. So yes. So the answer is yes, you can do that, and you would just choose how it's set. I had it on for everyone, so that way I could show how you could. I don't need the user settings anymore. So that you can have it enabled, enforced on the at the site level. If you recall, when I had this to set by administrator initially, this was not available to have it forced at the site level because it actually is set by the administrator. So thank you, Erica, for bringing that back there. Forgotten what I already talked about. But this is how you would actually do it. So you could have the administrator set per user on the page check, or you could have the individual users actually be set that way as well, if you want them to be able to decide. And you could actually have it disabled. I'm not aware of any that do at the moment, but you could do that as well. But yeah, that's definitely a good question and a useful feature to be able to use there. Okay, I don't see any other questions at the moment, so let me go ahead and get back down to the file naming here.
I think we have another question. Sorry.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah.
So this is a bit of a long question, so I'm going to paraphrase it. So basically, if we're working on the migration of many folders, they're going to migrate to a live site called www. Not all folders are ready, but they still need to proceed with launch. They don't want inadvertent publishes of not yet ready folders to the production server. If we want to move some not ready folders from the www site to a new site called demo, would cloning the site to demo with a different SFTP route and HTTP route make sense, or is there a better way?
Okay, so it's hopefully I've got that all right in my head, but yeah, it sounds like so with kind of migrating in sites, and you have some folders that are ready and some that are not, and would it make sense to use a site clone to put in the folders that are ready and so on? If I understand the question correctly, it probably you would not want to just clone the site and have it published to a particular folder. And kind of when I was going back to the top here, when I was doing this as a subfolder here, typically that's not a good practice, just because in my main site, I will see this folder and I'll be able to affect things outside of this particular site. And so it's not, necessarily as locked down to be able to do that. So you could set up a clone and publish to, those subfolders that you want for each one of those. But you could then run into the possibility that somebody's editing in this, new site, and also in the old site you cloned it from if it was a subfolder. So again, that's not usually recommended to do what I'm doing here, and the only reason I'm doing it in this particular demonstration, to reiterate, is just because I have those credentials here. I'm just, as an example, just reusing them to show what it looks like to set up a site. In reality, I'll actually probably delete this right after this training because it's not a good practice in general, but it does illustrate the concept here. All right. Were there any other questions, Erica, at the moment?
That's it for now.
Okay. So going back to the file naming, again, you can regex to choose which files and the naming that you want to have there. And you can type in a description so that when the users are creating files, it'll say, let them know what is allowed and not allowed. You can also check this not to say anything that doesn't match the regex is what's allowed. It can be a little confusing, but that's another possibility. But kind of a cool feature here is once you've done your regex, you can kind of test it and know your campus just by, typing in different values. And then if I do a space or something, it tells me what's going to pass and not pass the filter that I put in. So for instance, if I don't allow uppercase letters and then I start typing an uppercase letter, it's as I type, it's letting me know on the regex there. So that's kind of a cool little feature that I think is useful there. Again, you can do the same thing with the binary files. It's the same options. It just applies to the binary files instead of the regular files. And again, here's that allow uppercase folder names. If that's something that's needed, just make sure you check that so you're not confused, because maybe you're allowing uppercase file names, but the folder names may not be allowed because of this option. You can set also upload limits to what you want to have available when users create files. It'll give a message, error message that says, it's not available if you try to exceed these limits. And so you can, set, how many different bytes and so on that you want to actually be allowed, have the users allowed to be able to use for the limits, and this will enforce that for the site. And then you can also set different optional features. Again, as you noticed from the account settings, you can, disable some of these at the account settings, and they would be grayed out, and you wouldn't be able to allow them here. But you can check or uncheck the different ones that you want to have available for users for the particular site that you're creating. Once you actually have all these settings set and you have everything the way you want to go, your connection works, the only thing you have to do now is just hit create. And what it'll do is create the site. Normally this will be a green error message at the bottom, or green success message at the bottom here. But again, since I used that subfolder, it did give me that message saying, are you sure you want to do this? Because it's, got a little bit of a difference in the normal. I can go into my site settings again. You can go to edit site to get there. I often just like to click on the site name. It takes me to the same place as if I hit edit site. But if I click there, I can now see that, my site name is locked, and that's why I wanted to make sure I followed those naming conventions. And just to point out, here's that public key if you were to use that kind of authentication, as well as a UUID, which is used to identify the site in OU Campus as well. But if you did need to change your settings, something doesn't work, you can go back here and update any of this information later on, so you're not stuck with it once you create it. It's really just that site name is the only piece that really gets locked down once you've created your site. And I do see another question here that says, is there a time when you would not want to allow Dependency Manager for a site? And in general, I would say the answer is no, you probably would always want to have Dependency Manager. There are certain special situations where you might not want to have it, depending on if you're, copying files over or migrating a site, and you want to, have all the links that are not in dependency tags, certain specific scenarios that you might not want to use it. But in general, I would always recommend that you have Dependency Manager on for your sites. But this, again, you can go back to the site settings here. And anything that you had, you can change, update as needed, and hit save, and it'll update them. Another piece, though, that appears once you create the site is this, LDP settings. So for forms and galleries, you can set where the galleries would exist. This would be the host for where the server-side module is for forms. This is something that if you have us implementing this for you, that your OU Campus team or OmniUpdate team would work with you when they're working with your server people to make sure that this is correct and that this gets installed as needed. And then this directory would be if you're using LDP galleries. When you create those gallery assets, this allows you to specify where those images are stored for the galleries. So that's another path that you can put in there. And the one other piece that I wanted to point out once we created the site that we didn't see was these auxiliary sites. And so we have auxiliary sites here, and we have published targets here. And what this does, and I'll start with the published targets first, is you can actually add another published target. And that means that OU Campus would actually publish to a different production server than the one that you have set up as your main one. And when you're clicking publish on your, when you click the publish button for any page or file in OU Campus, you'll get a drop down between this site or however many of these you have and the main site that we've set up. and it'll allow you to, choose, where you want to publish to. I commonly, when I see this, it often is if you have kind of a test location where you kind of want to see where things publish out that's kind of a duplicate of your production site, you could publish them there. You can also add what's called auxiliary sites, and this is essentially, instead of a publish target, it's basically another location where you can grab resources from that is on your files and so on, but it's not actually accessible via HTTP. So it's another connection where you can actually pull from, usually when you're trying to grab information from other locations and so on. Maybe like different resources that when you're browsing, for where you're wanting to pull them from, you could browse through that in the OU Campus file system. You could browse to auxiliary sites if you kind of wanted to have a central location where to pull from. And then the publish targets if you want to be able to actually publish to multiple locations using the same set of files. So too, they can be useful if they're needed for their particular locations, but those two are also available that you can see once we've actually created the site. So I did want to point those out there. But let's say you've got all this set up, you've got your site. We do want to do that last step and just verify that everything is working as expected. And so what we can do is we can go to, content pages, make sure that we now go to the site that we have created. Since I cloned, it didn't change for me. If I created a new site, it may have actually switched it for me. But you can see I'm in my new site. This _resources folder actually exists here because we set that template directory. And so that resources OU template that we had defined in the site settings actually gets created here so that it's ready for you, because OU Campus knows to look there for templates, so it ensures that that exists. But nothing else exists here. I can go to production, which I wanted to test, and since I didn't see any errors, it successfully got there. Again, it verifies that I was able to connect successfully. So one thing that I then like to do is just put in some kind of a test file, and I happen to have a couple here that I have used just for testing it. I know this happens to be a PHP server, so I have this INC file that I have created, and all it is just says this is heading that says this is content from an include file. So I'm going to go ahead and publish that out and see if it publishes. And so the fact that something published is good. Again, I'm verifying that everything is publishing. It's being able to be viewed. If I go to production, I can see that it published to that production location that I'm looking at. And then let's also publish this particular file. And I'm just going to look at the source really quick to show you that it's just doing a simple PHP include to, I'm just testing out my that everything in my environment's working here. And then it has a bunch of just basic, HTML elements and so on in this particular test page. But if I publish this out, this time I'm going to click this view in a new window. And when I click that, you can see it takes me to that HTTP location. And what I expect to see if everything is set up correctly is all this information here is from my page is being hosted. If the HTTP route and the FTP route in the site settings do not match, this would not appear here correctly in this location. But in this particular case, everything appears to be working, which means that my site settings are correct and where I expect them to be. But if this didn't work and this location did not show me my file, or if it had some kind of an issue there, that's something, again, you'd want to talk with whoever's managing your server and make sure you kind of work out that you have the correct credentials, and then potentially adjust your site settings if those changed or you need to work with that. And you can see my include file worked, so I can see that I have all the, in this case, I also verified that PHP was running as it was supposed to here. And at this point, it looked like I'm pretty good. I can start actually working in OU Campus and publish my files and so on. The only thing I haven't done is that, edited or deleted anything. I'm just going to go ahead and delete here and just make sure that I can actually delete files from the production server that I have those privileges here. So you can delete straight from production like this. And if your server permissions do not work, this would not be a green error. It would say that, it was unable to delete the file. But you can also delete here from OU Campus by moving the recycle bin. And again, we're seeing green messages, which means everything's good. And if I go to production, you can see that that file was removed because I removed it from OU Campus staging. This one still remains on OU Campus staging just because I only deleted it from production, but I could delete it from staging as well. But at that point, I was able to, the only thing I didn't really check is renaming files, which you'd probably want to do as well. But you're able to make sure you had all the credentials we needed. We set up the site in OU Campus, and then you're able to verify that everything's working. And if something's not working, that's something you just want to make sure that those credentials and everything match. And that's why that FTP area is really one of those most important things when you're setting up a site. And then that allows you to really have everything going, and at this point you're ready to start working with your site, bring in whatever content you want to do, or if you cloned it, just publishing whatever with the files, you could start publishing it, editing files, and so on, and you're really set up with your site at that point. So that's really everything that I wanted to show you here. And so if there are any other questions, I'll feel free to ask those now. All right. Did you have any?
We have a question asking, can a site name be reused from a site that was deleted?
Yes, I believe it should be, and the only reason it wouldn't be is if there was some kind of a something that clogged up the system that you might need to email support so that we can clear out some kind of a database entry or something if there was some kind of an issue. But in general, yes, you should be able to reuse that site name as long as it was deleted previously. All right. Are there any other questions?
I'm not seeing any other questions come in. So if you have a last-minute question, you get it in quickly. And otherwise, that looks like it's it for today's OU Campus Training Tuesday.
I did see another question.
Oh, you see another question? Okay.
Yep.
There we go. There it is.
Yep. You got it in the last second. Good job. After the site is set up, is there a workflow tutorial? And I know there's a good, set of resources on the support site for access and workflow. I'm not sure. Erica, I don't know if you know if there's a particular.
So there's pages on the support side about access and workflow. We actually did a training Tuesday on access and workflow a little while ago. Adrian, what I'll do is after this session wraps up, I'll email you sort of a compilation of all the different things we have on access and workflow. And if there's something more specific that you need help with, feel free to reach out to feel free to reach out to me, and I can help you with that further. All right. Anything else?
I'm not seeing anymore.
I'm seeing a lot of questions in chat. The problem is with my WebEx window, everything is squished into one tiny little thing. Okay, there we go. All right. Okay, so let's see. All right, so apologize if I missed these earlier. I just didn't see them. Angela French would like to know can you talk about any best practices for file upload size limits?
I think the file upload size limits are really more on what is reasonable for the school. I think what we have there as a default is a good starting point. But if your school enforces particular things and limitations, I definitely want to follow those guidelines. And really the biggest thing that I would say is that, you don't want to have those so huge that you're using, these really large files that are probably not necessary if they get to a certain size. But in general, if you aren't sure what they should be, the defaults in OU Campus are generally a good starting point to go with.
We have another question from Michael, who is asking about switching from with the folders that weren't ready to be published, and if we need a demo site. He says, alternatively, is there a way in OU Campus to simply move some of the not yet ready folders from www to demo? Folder moves appear to be limited to moving within the site in OU Campus.
Yeah, the move function is within the site. If you do need to move files between sites, aside from a site clone copying things, if it's just the files you need, one thing that you can do is in the actual site setup, and let me just go to that really quick here. So for any of these things here, one thing you can do is actually export the site as a zip file, and that'll download all the files on staging locally. And then you can, take whatever parts you want as that, if there's particular folders, and you could re-upload those into a new site. So that would be a useful way to be able to do that. But yeah, there's, and again, as well as the site clone, if you have that copy, including the staging files checkbox there, that would be another way to do it. Now, the one thing that the site export does not do is copying extra things besides the files themselves, such as, if you had any, directory variables or so on, those would have to be reset after you do it. But it would be one potential way of getting those particular pieces there.
Let's see. And then it looks like, oh, Joel Arias has a question, but it looks like he didn't finish it. So if you want to finish, if you still want information on that. Another question from Angela French. I need to learn how to build all the pages associated with the PCF file. Do you have training on that? I believe that would be the templating tutorial we've done. Right, Brandon, did you do one of those, or was that Brandon?
I did one of those at the conference, but I didn't do a training Tuesday on it, yeah.
Okay. All right, so let's see. So we have the slides from that, at least, and those are being, I believe, posted on the OCN as we speak. And as far as the training Tuesday, I think Brandon has a sort of more simplified PCF building tutorial or training Tuesday that you can check out as well on our Vimeo channel. And if you have any more, if you want more in-depth information on that, maybe email training@omniupdate.com and we can help you out. All right. If there's no other questions, I will wrap things up. So next month's Training Tuesday is going to be on May 30th, the day after, sorry, my blank day after, gosh, it's Memorial Day, right? Yes, it's Memorial Day. I know it's, so yeah, so May 30th, stay tuned for the announcement of what the topic will be. And this session has been recorded. It should be up by the end of the day. If you need to look at it again, this will all be posted on the support site, on the OCN, on our Vimeo channel, and you can view the recording and, if you need a refresher. So, that's just a thank you. All right, you're welcome.
You're welcome.
All right, and that looks like it's it for today. So thank you, everybody, very much for attending, and I will see you all on May 30th.